There is a vast, and I do mean a vast majority of Americans that don't want men competing in women's sports. This is another one of those issues. But here comes the governor of Maine putting like a flag in the ground on the absolute wrong side of the battle lines, and Pam Bondi fired the first shot today.
Today, the Department of Justice is announcing a civil lawsuit against the Maine Department of Education. The state of Maine is discriminating against women by failing to protect women in women's sports. Pretty basic stuff.
Yeah, they are. Look, you want to let women or men in women's sports, you lose your funding, and we're going to sue you as well.
We want to make sure that if you open women's sports or intimate facilities to males, you expose yourself to federal civil rights investigations. Governor Mills will definitely get her wish.
And of course, the governor comes out and says, well, you know, they're cutting lunch programs and stuff. No, they're not. They're cutting funding for you for disobeying the law. And they're going to go through with that. And if you choose, Governor Mills, to cut that lunch funding, that's your fault. That's not the Trump's fault. You don't get to put that on them. Here's what's going on. Trump and about 80% of America don't think men should be competing in women's sports, which makes a ton of sense to anybody with half a brain and an IQ over 30. But what doesn't make a ton of sense is that Democrats, who have apparently skipped civics class, have made the case that America is a democracy. It's not. We're a constitutional republic. But since Democrats have made the case that America is a democracy, maybe they should live by that principle, because in a democracy, majority rules. The democracy has spoken. 80% of Americans want trans out of women's sports. So what are you, like, are you not the party of democracy anymore? Also, Maine has one of the lowest populations in the nation of transgender people. They place 42 out of 50. The governor's willing to anger almost every single person in the state to appease a few men pretending to be women, and it is a few. Keep in mind, the governor is also a woman, I think, but I don't get it. I genuinely believe that these men competing or wanting to compete in women's sports is some sort of like a weird fetish. But if you want to tell me that it's because, oh, they are genuinely female and they have rights too and we must be accommodating. No, but I personally think that you happen to be insane if you support that. And this is coming from the party, too, by the way, that during the last 4 years of COVID, we're like, follow the science, put your mask on, do all this stupid stuff, hug your relatives through thin plastic sheets. I mean, most of you who watch this show, obviously, you know, have passed basic biology in like 9th grade. So I don't need to explain X, Y, and XX chromosomes. But no matter what, to these Democrats, no matter what you chop off or so on, no matter what hormones you take, or if you grow your hair out, you cannot change your gender. I don't know how much clearer that can be. Look, every single one of these males was not even on the podiums as a competitive male athlete, yet they dominate female sports. Leah Thomas, formerly William Thomas, which is interesting because I'm actually like kind of torn on this issue because like you can legally change your name. If your name was Steve and you want to be John, fine. And like this person, if your name is William and you want to be called Leah, I guess fine, I'll call you Leah, but that doesn't make you a woman. It doesn't change your gender. Anyway, Leah Thomas, when he was competing as a man in the 200-yard freestyle, he wasn't even in the top 500 in male competitors. He actually made 65th nationally in the 500-yard freestyle, but like I said, that doesn't even get you a Christmas card at those rankings. But then he transitions to a woman, or pretends to be a woman, and pow, like all of a sudden, #1. Weird, right? But I'm sure that's just a fluke, right, Governor Mills? Nope, no, it's not. Laurel Hubbard, formerly Gavin. No one had ever heard of him as a male powerlifter until he won 2 gold medals in the Pacific Games as a woman. CC Tefler, formerly Craig. Again, nobody had heard of him as a guy. And then all of a sudden, he wins 2 NCAA Division II national championships in the women's 400-meter hurdles. And just to twist the knife in the women's suffrage movement, Outsports, it's a publication, named him Female Athlete of the Year. Just like, Veronica Ivy won the women's world championship in cycling. Not a woman. We know the two people in Connecticut, Terry Miller and Andrea Yearwood, winning multiple track titles after claiming to be women. They weren't even on the leaderboards as men. This one is near and dear to me because my wife is always telling me, she's like, oh, men have better spatial awareness than women. I'm like, okay, maybe. But if Noah Lynn Van Leuven is any indication of my wife's sentiment, by coming out of nowhere in men's darts, last year wins the women's titles. You can do this all day. Do it with recently Frisbee golf, fencing, track and field, volleyball. Remember that one? A biological dude like smashed a ball into a girl's face, permanently disabling her. Boxing, a guy broke a real woman's face. Everywhere men claim to transition to women, they are absolutely destroying women in their sports, sometimes literally. Men and women are not physically equal. And the argument that they somehow are, it just leads me to believe you should get a CAT scan. Like, here's a simple question. How come there's not a single woman claiming to be a man winning anything in men's sports? I mean, like, find me one. One? None? What woman is walking onto the NFL field and saying, like, hey, guys, I'm now a man. I'm here to start on your offensive line. That has happened approximately, give or take, 0 times because men are significantly stronger than women as a whole. Yes, some women are stronger than men, but those men don't win in sports either. And no matter how many steroids, because that's literally how women try to become men, they go on steroids. No matter how many steroids you give a woman, she's not going to compete with a 300-pound actual male offensive lineman. She's just not. And I know that because it has not happened. And if there was, in this crazy push for all this stuff, they would have found someone and like put them on a pedestal and told all these crazy stories, but they didn't because it doesn't exist. There is a reason why there is a WNBA and an NBA. And there's also a reason that the NBA has to subsidize the WNBA because they are not as good as the NBA, and as a result, not as many people watch them. Look, if you need more proof of biological differences, my alma mater, they opened up the Navy SEAL pipeline to women. Guess how many made it through? 0, just none. So I don't know what this Maine governor is thinking. And this is not a knock on women, folks, okay? This is an actual plea to help women and to protect them and to give them their own competitive space in support of them. You know that whole supporting that women's rights movement that the left has come like full circle on apparently on this? You know how many dads out there just like me I'm literally willing to go to war to keep my daughter from getting beaten up by a biological male. You don't believe me? Test those waters at your own peril. You know how many moms feel the same way? Now let's play this out in court, okay? That this court case that Mills is getting herself into. Actually, the UK just did, and their Supreme Court ruled that the word woman refers to your biological sex that you can't change. And that's the UK of all places. So I imagine how this is going to go in America. We might even get Amy Coney Barrett on the side of this one. Let's actually game this out in court. Like, let's say you're a lawyer representing the state of Maine who thinks that men should be able to compete with women. What's your argument? I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like, when I was writing this, I literally didn't know. Men can claim to be women, then they're actually women, and what, like, okay. If I was opposing counsel or even the judge, under cross-examination, I'd be like, great, I'd ask the witness, what makes you female? Because you say so? Like, can you answer that? No. And then I would ask, so if you claim to be a billionaire, should the bank have to acknowledge that and deposit $1 billion into your account? Of course not. If I claim to be the father of a child that's not mine, should everyone just acknowledge that I'm the child's father and give me all the rights of fatherhood? No. If I claim to be your boss at work, do I get to tell you what to do? No. I feel this way. I was actually born this way, and that's how I identify as your boss. I would get laughed out of the room. This is literally my argument against the transgender movement. You can put on a pair of women's shoes, you can put on a little bit of lipstick or makeup or a dress or whatever else and pretend to be a woman. I don't care. You can do whatever you want in your own home, but I reserve the right to make fun of you about it. But you do you, bro. But what you can't force me to do, and you can't force other women who have been women their whole lives because they're actual women, you cannot force them to pretend with you, especially not at the expense of my daughter's hard work and her life's dedication to a sport that thought she was competing against actual women. This sounds like, if you're sitting there at home, you're like, yes, this sounds really reasonable. It does. That's why it's an 80-20 issue. And for some reason, the governor of Maine is choosing the wrong side of it.
He loves the Constitution. He fights for what's right. He hates the bad guys. He's a freedom warrior. He's your freedom warrior. Watch Carl Higbie every weekday on Newsmax.